That takes us now to declaration of interest, and just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interests they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. If anybody's got a declaration, could they put their hand up, please? That would be a bit easier than everybody trying to speak at the one time. No declarations. Okay, then that takes us to item 3 on your agenda this morning. It's the Falkirk Local Development Plan 2 examination report and modifications. The report is by Mr. Douglas Duff this morning, and it's pages 2 to 56. Also in attendance with Mr. Duff is Alistair Shaw. Okay, Mr. Duff, thank you very much.
Thank you, Provost, and thanks for the opportunity to present this report. It summarises the outcome of the work that's taken place in the examination of the proposals that we had in the Local Development Plan 2, following a number of representations that had been submitted and unresolved. These have now been through the examination. We have the report with us, and we seek approval to a set of modifications to the plan in order for it to proceed to adoption. The report concludes 5 years of work involving several stages to get to this point. It has been through considerable consultation and engagement with the development industry, with communities and with members over the course of the 5 years. And effectively it sets us on the course for the next 10 years for development that we hope to see come forward. Effectively, it is the fuel in the tank for the development industry and for construction jobs in the area over that period. So it's an important stage, an important step forward to see the adoption of the plan, and therefore we're keen now to see that move forward. The background to the report highlights that this follows on from the previous Local Development Plan LDP1, which was adopted in July 2015. And as soon as that was completed, we moved on to the next a new development plan, LDP2. It builds on the principles that were established in LDP1 and carries those forward. We did get approval through the Council in August 2018 to the proposed LDP2, and these were subject to further representations, which then brought us to the finalised version of the plan in 2019. That has been sent off for the consideration by the DPEA, the reporters unit. 3 reporters examined the representations that were made and supplied us with a report. In particular, they had conducted a hearing in relation to the question of strategic housing land supply. That was the fundamental part of the considerations concerning the plan. And they've made a number of recommendations to us, which we now need to take forward into the adopted plan. The section 4 of the report sets out the findings of the examination report. It highlighted that there were 26 unresolved issues which had to be examined by the reporters, and there was a detailed report given back to the Council with their findings in regard to these issues. A summary of their recommendations is given in the first appendix to the report. As I say, the main challenge related to strategic housing land supply, and there were a number of questions there around the Council's methodology for calculating the housing land target. It was deemed that that was flawed and that it was too low. And members may recall that we had looked at the extent of the housing land supply and the targets that should apply, and at the final stage reduced the target to recognise the availability of supply to meet that target, and amended that in respect of the housing need and demand assessment that was undertaken. The reporters have suggested that rather than the annual target of 450 units, the proposed plan and now for adoption should accommodate a target of 530 houses annually. They also recommended that we increase the flexibility allowance that is applied during the plan period from 14% to 17%, and that gives an overall housing land requirement of 8,066 units in the period through to 2030. The existing land supply that we have is 5,396. Given that increase in the targets, the reporters considered all the submissions that had been made for additions to the land supply and identified a series of sites that should be proceed to meet the additional requirement of some 1,550 units, and a list of sites that is proposed to be included in the plan is included in the table in paragraph 4.3. The reporters also gave some recommendations in relation to the economic development sites, including the business allocation at Gilston and at Glensborough, changing these to mixed-use developments. And there were a number of other minor changes in relation to a proposal at Hillcrest relating to access, and also at Grand Sable Road at the Falkirk Distillery to exclude an overlap with the World Heritage Site. There's also some minor amendments to the proposals map. Importantly, in making these recommendations, they also suggested that a new section of development guidance is included for the major land releases that are proposed in the plan at Crawfield Road in Bowness and at Gilston, and it suggested that that guidance be incorporated in the plan as a basis for exerting control over how these developments should proceed. The modifications proposed by the reporters are largely binding on the Council as the planning authority. They have been through all of that consultative process and through the examination, and therefore the circumstances whereby the Council could choose to neglect the recommendations that have come from the reporters are very limited. And the criteria at the top of page 6 set out the considerations whereby the Council might choose not to accept the recommendations from the reporters. But as we say, the scope for that is very limited, and I'm conscious in this that there may be some interest in these considerations. And if there are further questions, Colin Moody has offered to speak more at the end of my summary, just to give clarification on those points. But basically, they set out 4 criteria which relate to the consistency with the National Planning Framework, the application of habitats and conservation regulations, whether they would not be acceptable having regard to an environmental assessment, and also that the conclusions couldn't reasonably have been reached by the reporter given the evidence that had been given at the examination. And therefore our conclusion is that we don't feel that there is a case to make against any of these considerations, and that we should accept the reporter's findings and include them in the finalised plan and move to adoption. So the proposed modifications are set out in Appendix 2 to the report, with the narrative explaining, and the modified plan itself is attached in full as an appendix to the report, and that picks up some of the minor corrections that are also necessary to see the plan through to adoption. The final step, therefore, is for the Council to publish its intention to adopt the modified plan and send it on to Scottish ministers. At that stage, if it appears to them that the plan is unsatisfactory, if we were to amend it from what is being proposed to us, then Scottish ministers can issue a direction to the Council requiring the further modifications to be made, effectively to revert to what the reporters are recommending. If there's no direction to change given, then the Council can then adopt the plan, and we're given 28 days to make that adoption. There will be some further actions to take place from the adoption. We will establish an action programme to take that forward, and clearly that will be an important signal to the development industry to get going on the plan's proposals. We will also establish some supplementary guidance that reflects the policy guidance that's given in the plan itself. We do have a set of supplementary guidance currently, and we would need to run with that guidance established under LDP 1. We would need to run with that as non-statutory guidance until the new set of guidance is applied. In relation to consultation, I mentioned earlier that we have conducted quite extensive consultation to get to this point. There were a series of early issues identified. A call for sites was undertaken, and that was the opportunity for any site to be considered that would help us to meet that land supply target. All of that was captured then in the main issued report and fundamentally in the proposed plan. There is some clarification here around the legal basis for the steps that are taking here. It relates to the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act and further guidance and circulars that are given to manage the process whereby the plan can be adopted. At paragraph 6.4, we set out a number of risks relating to any steps that would affect the Council were we declining to accept one or more of the reporter's recommendations. And we highlight that the reporter's recommendations are largely binding because they respect the housing requirements overall and create an integrated package. In essence, the plan is a coherent whole with the establishment of the land supply target and the sites that are to make that up. Not to accept that would mean that the plan would be fundamentally undermined. If there's not a robust justification for declining, the likelihood is that Scottish ministers would direct that the plan can't be adopted, and that would mean that we would have to revert to the LDP 1 being the adopted plan for the area, with the higher housing target then having to be applied, and that brings risks that further developers could bring forward sites for approval. There is also the potential that there could be a legal challenge were we not to accept the recommendations that have come forward. In relation to equalities, we've done a full equalities assessment. We've also conducted full sustainability and environmental impact assessment of the plan, and that's accommodated the various changes that have come through. We've also had regard to the habitats regulations appraisals, which are also necessarily for the plan, and it's demonstrated that the plan will not adversely affect the integrity of any protected sites. So in conclusion, this is really the end of the road for the adoption of the LDP. We want now to move forward to see the plan adopted and give the assurance to the development industry that they can move forward with their plans for investment in the area. We have the recommendations from the report. These are largely binding on the Council, and therefore we feel they should be included in the adopted plan and that we should move forward. It gives stability and direction to the market at a very important time for the economy, and therefore we feel that this is an important step for the Council to adopt. I may just pass on to Colin just to give clarification to those 4 criteria that are pertinent to the Council's position on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duff. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I think Mr. Duff has set out the position clearly and at some length in relation to the legal structure that we're dealing with here. But maybe just to confirm that we are at the final stage of the local development planning process. And the structure of the statutory provision that we're dealing with here essentially says that the planning authority will make the modifications that are recommended by the reporters, except where it declines to do so, and it can only decline to do so on the basis of one of the 4 criteria which are set out in your report and to which Mr. Duff has referred you to. The other aspect to emphasise on that, though, is it's not open to the planning authority simply just to refer to the criteria. It has to have reasons for doing so and has to explain why they decline to accept the modification by reference to the criteria. So it's not simply just a matter of judgment, of saying that the modification which has been recommended isn't favoured by the council. Reasons would need to be given, and those reasons would need to refer to the criteria that are set out in the report. And turning to these, I think it can be seen that the first 3 of those are fairly technical planning considerations, which would require reasons which are grounded very much in those technical aspects of the reasons. The one which offers perhaps more discretion is the 4th of them, and that's the one that relates to the view that the recommendation is not one that a reporter could reasonably have made on the evidence before him or her. But again, that's a high bar to reach. It's not simply saying that the council disagrees with the recommendation. It's saying that it's one that a reporter could not have reasonably made on the evidence. So it's a high bar for the council to reach where it minded to decline to accept any of the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moody. Could I maybe ask at this time, can everybody hear the officers? Yep. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think we're going now to Councillor Alexander?
Yes, good morning. The development plan before us is a result, as we've heard, of 5 years of work. And sometimes at the end of that 5-year period, or the end of whatever period, you feel as if you've been listened to, you feel you've been heard and you've been acted upon. There must be a feeling in parts of the district where none of these criteria has been met, or the feeling is that none of these criteria have been met. We've heard from the officers this morning just exactly what the legislation says. And the 2006 planning regulations are very, very draconian in terms of the power that's put in the hands of the reporter. That's saying that's where we are at the moment. On occasion, we look at situations as they arise, and we see that perhaps the worst elements are coming through after this stage, and that would direct us towards the implementation of the existing LDP2 to become the LDP2 draft, become the full document. Quite frankly, the implications for the authority are frightening if we oppose the views of the reporter and seek a delay in the conclusion of this particular exercise. We have addressed the issue of the land set aside for housing, the shortfall that existed in the past. And we've seen a few decisions over the last few years that have been contrary to what the views of the committee, whether it be the planning committee or whether it be the full council, actually are. Most recent of which was, of course, is the Boness application that's referred to, or the Boness site that's referred to in the papers. And you know, it's frustrating to see the views of the local authority be disregarded in such a way. But as I say, we are where we are. There is more that is good within the report. We tend to look very much at the negative we tend to look very much at where we've been contradicted in view of our own beliefs, and that's understandable. But in terms of the commercial and business sites, then they're to be very much welcomed. The clarification of a number of sites are also to be welcomed, and as is the recognition that the environment is an important part of the development plan itself. So with that, I think the officers have stated all that they can at the moment, and I think that they've made it very clear the choices before us today. It's not exactly the choice that we would have gone with ourselves, but as I say, the 2006 legislation does give a great deal of power to the reporter, and certainly as will be felt. So with that, I would formally move the recommendations contained within the report. Provost, I think that enough has been said by me and by officers to leave the members in uncertain terms. That there's a great deal of work before us. There is a great deal that's positive about this report. There's a great deal that's negative, and we have to accept both with equal grace and both with equal determination to turn them to our advantage. And that is the important thing. We retain the areas of control that we have at the moment, and we work towards the implementation of the good aspects of the report, and the issues that concern us can be addressed as we go. So with that, as I say, Provost, formally move recommendations contained.
Have we got a seconder for that?
Provost.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Okay, thank you, Provost. I would just like to pay tribute to the huge amount of work that has been carried out by the officers in producing this plan year on year. That there's been a massive effort to pull this together, and as Councillor Alexander has said, that there has been a lot of dialogue, and to get to a point where we have the recommendations before us from the reporter, we will feel a bit deflated and a bit disappointed. But I am, however, happy to second my colleague in the acceptance of LDP2 for all the reasons that Councillor Alexander has indicated. And there are a lot of positives within this, and what we do have is a lot of challenges. I dare say today there'll be many of the views expressed by other members that I will have a lot of sympathy with. But as been said, we are at the final point of this plan. The importance of the plan is a key strategic document for the Council for the next 5 years, and it can't be stressed enough how important having this in place actually is. The reporter not having accepted our lower housing target, we don't have the ability to now go back and have a discussion and change that, and to have further dialogue. I think that a lot of members would have liked to have had that opportunity, and perhaps the opportunity to dictate if we're going to have to accept a higher housing target, what sites that might be, but we don't have that ability under the legislation, which may be unfortunate, and that's maybe something that we need to, for the future, feedback to ministers, that we could actually have probably come to a better outcome if that had been open to us, but it's not open to us, and it's not possible to remove sites and substitute sites at this stage. Officers have clearly said that the 4 criteria under exceptional circumstances would need to be met for any changes, and there would need to be a robust case put forward for that, and it would be very difficult to do that based on the evidence in front of us. Defaulting on our LDP, as also has been said, it would go to LDP1, and we would have an even higher target for housing, which would give us a greater challenge, and potentially could mean the loss of the 5 years' work that have been put in by officers, and we may lose some of the good aspects that are in the plan, and that would not be good for the council in just so many ways. It would take us right back to the start of the process, leaving the council exposed to challenge, and taking away from control from the authority, and we would then not necessarily have the controls that we would want around some of the sites and the applications coming forward, and it would have an impact on our local economic recovery plan, and the investment which is so desperately needed, particularly at this time. Members not be happy with the outcome from the reporter. There is little that we can do. What is important is that we look to safeguard our communities, particularly those in the large controversial site areas that have been added, in order to make sure that we meet our housing targets. This can be done by robust and inclusive master planning of those sites, and ensuring that that's embedded within the supplementary planning guidance that requires to be brought forward to support LDP2, and that's what we need to focus on now. So I'm happy to second the report and the acceptance.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up for any other members. If you remember to put your hand up. Councillor McHugh. Right, Councillor McHugh.
Sorry, my mute button wasn't quite working there. Really just want to say that, yeah, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in some of the decisions that have been made in this report that has been taken out of our hands. But I understand that if we don't adopt this report, if the report is left wide open, then we weaken our stance, we weaken our powers as applications come forward for planning, then it weakens our position. And it also leaves us wide open to developers to come in and basically slaughter us. So although I'm not entirely happy with the plan, I accept it, and I'm happy to agree it.
Thank you very much. Any other hand? Councillor Kerr's hands up.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to highlight how much hard work has been into the LDP2 plan. When this plan is adopted, the residents of Falkirk will think the plan is done by elected members. So if there's any controversial sites, we get the blame. Strategic housing land supply is the most significant issue. And for many years, the council's methodology has stated that we have the calculations correct. And this is why developers have gone to the reporter and have won. Not them all, may I say, but some have went because the land supply target hasn't been met. It clearly states in the report that the reporter doesn't think we have the correct methodology, and especially the timescale we have set to calculate it. I believe, Provost, that we have been directed and manipulated to this position. If the reporter felt that 450 houses annually was too low, I believe at that stage the reporter should allow this to come back to elected members for us to put forward exercise. This is the first LDP that I've been involved in, and at the start I was looking forward to shaping the future of Falkirk area. And today I feel we've been given the reporter's plan. North Bank Farm, Madison Fire Station and Stirling Road, I can see why they have been added to the report, as they all went to the reporter with a shortage of land supply and were approved. I don't know if the others, others might have been chosen by elected members. They might not have. What also is worrying in the report, Provost, on proposals is BUS 23, the Grand Sable site, the revised boundary. as it shows in the map, did the Romans, when they built the wall in that manner, did they know that Cadger's Bray and the Premier Inn was going to be built there? Because recently we've just allowed the garden centre to build right over this area. And you see the shape of the map. I don't think that's right, Provost. Provost, I'm hoping that these sites can be delivered, as there was 3,600 houses allocated in Local Development Plan 1 that was not delivered. This is unprecedented times, Provost, and who knows how or when these might be delivered. And I hope that going forward, for the purpose of LDP3, that elected members' views and input is more valued. Thank you very much, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Anybody else got their hand up? Councillor McClucky's got his hand up.
Hopefully a wee bit extra time here because it's such an important document. You remember, Provost, when we were running planning a few years ago with the previous administration, we were inundated with major developers with their experts writing to us, telling us that our methodology, including land supply, was incorrect. We forwarded all that to senior officers. John Angel at the time was head of planning, and what come back is they believed the methodology was right. Now, we questioned that, but we were told, because we had faith in John, that everything was correct. And we also asked the question, if we are correct, why are we not writing to all these developers to question and stop these being inundated with these comments coming into the council? We're really not getting sent legal letters and telling them to cease this if we are correct. And we've got the answer now, Provost, quite clearly. We didn't send legal letters to them because they were right, and obviously we must have known they were right. That's the situation. That led us to come into the next plan using the same methodology. We were still using the same captain that sunk the Titanic to go there and obviously drive the next boat. Right, and we've came in with a plan that took 2,500 houses out of my ward alone with vice officers. We went that and we done that. We now find out, obviously, and the report clearly says that their methodology was deeply flawed, right? And they've asked for 1,500 extra houses in. We took out White Cross, which was 1,500 houses, agreed already in LDP1, agreed by the previous reporter, agreed by all local members, right, and the community are happy there, and agreed with Scottish ministers. Right, for 1,500 houses. That would have made the requirement without these extra sites at Gilston and Bowness and that going ahead. Now, what happened in between times is we lost 3 major appeals. So the people at Larbert feel let down because hundreds of houses gone there. The people, obviously, at Bowness feel let down. They didn't want the houses in there. And housing element was put in the fire station at Madison. We lost the three appeals because of land supply targets, right, that we already knew. But when we asked before the local plan 2 went away to ministers, we asked, could we make changes? Our officers told us we couldn't make changes. You could only make a minor change. And everything we suggested was classed as major. We asked about the distillery site because obviously members were keen to support something that the Scottish Government had put money into there, and I believe it's starting manufacturing now, and it got stopped development. We was told that it wasn't a field site. We wanted it about, we're supposed to be supporting obviously tourism, we're supposed to be supporting our local industries. And then obviously, as I say, and that's what would have happened by supporting housing development at White Cross. We've noticed that before on almost a number of sites, that to go and get hotels and go and get other businesses in, we've had to, and go and get road improvements, we've had to put a housing element in to make sure it gets delivered. Gilston didn't get delivered with economic development, it was put in, and it sat for all the years. No, all the garden centres and everything that was going to come, where are they? No, there. Obviously, what's happened now is the reporter is going against 1,000 people down in Parliament and wanting to put all these houses in their province. That's entirely what it is. Now, I understand and actually agree with most of what David Alexander says, because at this stage, now that we're at this stage, we can't do nothing. But all along, we went and said over the 5 year that things change. I took out Whitecross because it didn't look like any development would take place. We've had 2 subsequent applications coming in to go and move. And obviously, we're not going into application because we're here to talk about the generality. But what I'm saying is things changed. We didn't get a chance to modify it in line with the changes that was coming up. And that's what's happened. And obviously I also agree that legislation, planning guidelines must give us a scope for this. We never thought we'd get a virus and all that. We didn't think that economic development jobs were going to be that important, because most of our people in Falkirk area were working in different things. We're now in a scenario where that's not there. But as previous speakers had said, the public out there are going to be deeply disappointed with this. This is supposed to be local and community planning. And I don't see any of these sites being agreed by the community. They weren't agreed by us, as I say, and the reporter quite as went there and just stuck the uses in. And it would have been easy for the reporter to have said, right, we'll just say Whitecross in, which is already in, and that was the housing supply dealt with. There was no need to go in and start putting more houses into Bowness and Gilston and all that. We never got the opportunity, but he had the opportunity to go and make an easy sense, something that was already in the local plan. But once again, the local plan is set up by, when it comes up right away, it's officers' recommendations. But that is the basis of the report eventually that goes to ministers, even for the sites where elected members decided that we weren't happy with the recommendations. And quite clearly, it should happen and has to happen in the future provinces. We have to go and get a third party in. If members disagree with certain elements of the local plan, we need to get Brodies or somebody in to go, what can be worded differently? And we need to put a strong proposal that the reporter can change and amend to ensure that the people of Falkirk and the members of Falkirk are listened to and given an opportunity and get some through. I'm not blaming, there's no politics involved, there's no blame game going to anybody, because like I say, the issue was the same previously. We went with advice, but surely we must take responsibility that things have got to change in the future, Provost. Something's got to amend. We can't ask officers who supported Gilson when it came to a local plan. Members didn't want it, but we can't ask the same officers to go and put forward anything to say they're against it, because they were for it. They were for houses in certain of these other areas, and we've got to safeguard them as well, because quite clearly, as I say, that's the idea of having a third party, just to take officers and members out of the equation and use the basis, a different methodology, and ensuring that what the people want, what the members want, is what's carried. We're left here, we can't change anything. All we can do, Provost, is change the next one and go on right away and start making changes this next one. But we've got to, if we don't change the way we do it, we're going to end up in the same place in 5 years' time, with a reporter passing everything, our developers passing in, instead of the community and elected members passing it. So I'll leave it at that, Provost, but I agree that there's nothing we can do. But as I say, all along, officers told us, oh, you can't change that, that's a major thing. Oh, you can't change that. No, we really class that as major. Right. Never went back to committee, discussed a third party to go and look at. Can that be amended? Can that be changed? So I'd like to thank for your indulgence to the elected members for that. Obviously, some of over the years I felt very strongly about, as you're well aware of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else like to come in? Put your hand up. David Aitchison, Councillor Aitchison, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Given the inclusion of the Crawfield Road site on top of the North Bank Farm report from the reporter, and also on top of the Bowness Road closure, I fear local democracy has been taken out of our hands. These are decisions that have been taken by the Scottish Government reporter, and I think it's setting an unhealthy precedent, and I really fear for the future. The report is as it is, but I don't think it's healthy and in the best interest of the locals. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Black, had you your hand up? No? We'll bring you back in, Mr. Duffin, later on to maybe answer some of the points that have been brought forward. Anybody else like to come in at this stage?
Hi, Provost, can I come
Where are we?
in? Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Bissett, right, thank you.
Hi, thanks, Provost. First of all, I'd just like to welcome Councillor Kerr to his new role as leader of the Conservative group in Falkirk, and I wish him well with that and all the challenges that will bring. And also, I'd like to congratulate Douglas Duff on his promotion to acting director, and wish him well with that as well. Certainly, I think the general feeling that's coming out of this is that members are generally not happy with the plan, but as Councillor Alexander said, we are where we are. There's a lot of pros and cons in it, and I think given the current crisis we're in, we've got to move forward with this plan and adopt it, and try and develop economically for the area. So I think going forward, I don't know if we need something like a policy development panel set up or something, so we can lay down the ground rules for LDP3 for member engagement, to show that so members are involved at every step of the way, and nobody feels perhaps they've been disenfranchised, whether that's a perception or not. But I think we need to kind of make sure that every member is fully engaged and understands the process, and that nobody feels, oh, we didn't have an opportunity to engage, so or put items in or take items out. So at this stage, we shouldn't even be at this point where we're saying we feel we've never had an opportunity. But I do feel there is a big push on community participation, and this feels like the opposite of that. It feels like this is the local democracy has been taken away, as Councillor Aitchison said. So I don't think I'll say any more than that, other than we need to adopt it and move forward given this current crisis. And I'd just also like to pay tribute to Arthur Shaw and his team for the diligent efforts that they've put in over the 5 years. I know it's hair pulling time and stuff like that. It's a very difficult process, and I understand that, and I'd like to thank them personally for that. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. I think Councillor Nicholl had his hand up.
I did indeed, Provost. Thank you. I think most members will appreciate that this is a very sad day for me, and as other members have touched on, indeed a sad day for local democracy, in that, as you know, Provost, for many years this was the responsibility of the members to finally determine, and that seems to have been taken out of our hands. And I concur with all the other members who have made remarks regretting that fact. But we are where we are, and as I say, it's a sad day for me, but it's also a sad day for the thousands of people in Polmont who over the years have signed petition after petition against the development at Gilston. The reasons behind them signing the petition are well known, Provost, and I have, as their representative on many occasions in the council, made the views known. Housing development at Gilston will not only exacerbate the great problems of parking at Polmont Station and the surrounding streets, the traffic issues, particularly in Gilston Crescent, and I'm particularly annoyed to see a proposal that would allow traffic come off the proposed development onto Gilston Crescent. I think that is a very bad move, as well as the implications for the local schools and health centre. So it is with great regret that I have to accept reality and agree, as other members have said, that this is more or less now a done deal, an imposition by the reporter against the views of local people. And I don't know how we, as Robert has just said there, we can look at ways to make sure this doesn't happen again. But I do think that we have been shortchanged on this occasion. There were other options which, if we were allowed to put forward, I think would have provided a better options other than Gilston, and Whitecross has been touched on. But it's with a lot of regret. But I'm comforted by colleagues of all parties who obviously hold similar views to me, that this is not our doing. It's not perfect by any means, as David said at the start. There are many good things in it, but goodness, there are many things that I certainly, and I'm sure other members would have preferred to have had the opportunity to provide alternatives to, had we been given that chance. So it will be a very reluctant Councillor Nicholl that at the end goes along with the recommendations. Provost.
Thank you for that. Just to clarify where we have a motion moved by Councillor Alexander, seconded by Councillor Nicholl-John, that we agree the recommendations. At this stage, we have no amendment. Is there anybody going to come forward with amendment? Could we maybe ask, you could maybe put your hand up at this stage, if we know, and then I'll maybe let another 2 or 3 in that would like to maybe contribute. No, nobody come in with amendment. Is there anybody else like to contribute? Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks very much, Provost. Just quickly, regarding the issue with Gilston, Councillor Nicholl's concerns regarding this has been an ongoing thing for a good number of years, and there's a lot of local people in Polmont would be really upset with an additional 500 houses without the infrastructure being in place to support it. Land supply, there seems to be a totally different way of calculating things. We need to get the basics right. If we're calculating land supply one way and the Scottish Government's calculating it another, what is the point in that? We should be doing it in the same manner so that we come up with the same figures. I don't understand that at all. But we need to get the basics right. I'll leave it at that just now, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on, I've been listening to everybody and agreeing with everybody, but I think that we should take a minute and just reflect on the fact about the code of conduct that's given to councillors, where it says under the policy and strategic issues 7.7, the requirements of this part of the code should not limit you from discussing or debating matters of policy or strategy, even though these may provide the framework within which individual applications will in due course be decided. 7.8, therefore, in your key role in establishing planning policies for the area, you are fully entitled to express your views or advocate proposals for the making, approval, or amendment of the development plan, including supplementary planning guidance published by the Planning Authority, both relating to general policies for the authority's area, and to briefs and master plans prepared for specific sites in anticipation of planning applications. Councillor Nicholl has stated quite rightly that what used to be was that this was probably one of the most important meetings in the council's history, as it came up every few years. That happened that every individual councillor at that time had an opportunity to come forward at the very end, whether they wanted to promote, or as the word says, advocate for a site, or take sites out. And then there was usually voting done that evening. It used to be usually on a Monday evening. We now have a situation where the terminology used, to me, is quite distracting, but it states that we have to really determine this plan under the decisions taken by the reporter. Now, I'm going to ask Mr. Duff on this issue, because I'm quite sure that Mr. Duff had said to me yesterday during the pre-meeting that there had been a council had taken legal action, or had went to court in relation to this new system that's in operation, which what it does, it erodes the members' decision-making process within this local plan situation. Mr. Duff?
Yes, Provost, there has been a circumstance in Western Bartonshire Council where the council was minded not to accept the recommendations of the reporter, and ministers rejected that proposal and asked that they put the proposal back in their plan. The council chose to dismiss the plan and start afresh, but in the end up, the proposal that was the subject of contention ended up being included in that fresh plan. It's a consequence of this process. No one is content with the way that this process works. It is very much stacked on the basis of ensuring that the housing land supply can be met. The reasons for that relate to national policy and the pressure to meet the demands of an expanding population. So it is something that, whilst there are lots of frustrations about, it is important to respect in this, and therefore is a way to move forward. I should add that, in fact, there was a decision made at Quarter Session last week, which reinforced this point. Apparently, the treatment of housing land supply in England is even more stringent when it comes to ensuring that the land supply targets are met. And that approach in England was endorsed in consideration at the Quarter Session last week for an application over in Renfrewshire. So this very much is a case of this being the whole intent of the development plan process, to make sure that the land supply can meet the needs of a growing population, and therefore all of the methodology and all the process is built around that point.
Thank you. The reason I asked that, because it shows you quite clearly that all over that members are unhappy with this process, and the word binding to me, I think, epitomises it. Okay, then we have a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendation. Is there anybody otherwise minded? We agree the recommendation. If you just put your hands up, it would be better. Everybody agreed? Okay then, thank you. Agreed the recommendation. Thank you. That takes us to item 4 this morning.
So you're not letting anybody else in, Provost?
COVID-19 interim decision-making structure, and it's pages 57 to 64, and the report is by Mr. Moody. Thank you, Mr. Moody.
Thank you very much, Provost. And as you say, the report relates to an interim decision-making structure, and members will see that there are recommendations set out at paragraph 2 of the report. And those, I think, give the structure of the issues that the report seeks to cover. So, first of all, the report recommends to you an interim decision-making structure that will take the Council through to the next full Council meeting on the 30th of September. At our last full Council meeting, we agreed the current interim decision-making structure, and at that point, we'd anticipated we would be able to return to the ordinary committee structure and physical meetings in August. It's now clear now that that won't be possible to meet the current social distancing guidelines, and also in general the route map from lockdown that was issued by the Scottish Government. So the proposals attempt to address the position and meet those particular requirements while providing an adequate decision-making structure for you. The core of the recommendations are, firstly, that we continue with an emergency executive. I think, in my assessment, the emergency executive has been a useful body during the COVID period. It allows for decisions to be made quickly in an agile way, and that's been useful during the period. The recommendation is that we continue that until the end of September, and there'll be an opportunity to review at that point whether it will still be required afterwards. The only change to the emergency executive is to slightly expand the remit and the expanded remit is set out in paragraph 5.1 of your report. The only expansion is just to add the words "are significant or otherwise" to time critical. So it's just a possibility of saying that if there is a very significant issue that needs determined, one of the examples might be our procurement policy, which wouldn't necessarily be time critical, which is important for the council to take forward. It's also recommended that we re-establish the rest of the committees, which are within your decision-making structure, and that those will take place by video conference in the same way as the emergency executive has, and also this present meeting is taking place. There's a qualification to that, which is that if we reach stage 4 of the Scottish Government's route map, then we will aim, if technology allows, and we think it will allow, to establish hybrid meetings. And by that I mean members can attend physically with relevant social distancing, and others can participate in the meeting at the same time by remote access on video. The third recommendation set out in your report relates to taking decisions on major planning applications, and in particular to those applications which require a predetermination hearing. I think you'll all be aware at the moment that those currently require to be determined by the council rather than planning committee. A change in legislation has given councils discretion on whether that can be done at planning committee or done at the full council. And the recommendation is that we change our current arrangements to allow the planning committee to take the decision after a predetermination hearing. And finally, we come to the issue of recess, and this builds on comments that have been made by some members raising concerns of, firstly, did we need a recess given the current situation the council and our communities are dealing with, or secondly, was the recess too long? And I think taking that on board, the recommendation is that we have a shorter recess than we would ordinarily have. I think there's a recognition there that there may be decisions that do need to be taken in an earlier stage of August. And I think the report also makes clear that if a special meeting were required during the July period, then it's open to call that meeting of the emergency executive to take any decision that was required. And members may be aware that there is in fact also a continuation of last week's meeting of the emergency executive still pending, as there are important issues to address in relation to return to school that weren't able to be resolved at that particular meeting. So perhaps I'll revert again to the recommendations which are set out at paragraph 2 within the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. I think we've seen the positive signs of the cautious approach to the exiting of lockdown, and as a result of the pandemic across Scotland. People are desperate to get back to a bit of normality, but we're still working out what that normality will be, and aspects of the relationships to come. We've still to work all of that out, and therefore I think it is right that we still continue to take that cautious approach. It's imperative that we don't jeopardise the progress that is being made. Therefore, by example, we should continue taking things in a slow and managed way to return to face-to-face meetings. So it's important that we start having our other democratic processes back in place, and start having those decision-making processes progressed, but we do it in a very managed way. And as a result, I'm pleased to see that there's a proposal to use the technology, although I am aware that people are having difficulties with technology, and perhaps at some point we could get an update to members about how we're looking to progress that. As I'm aware that members are about to be moved on to Microsoft 365, and therefore the use of Microsoft Teams may be a wee bit more robust than some of it that we're doing just now, but that's a side issue. So as I say, there's a real desire to get back to what is our normal, or what will be our new normal practices, and that there's a feeling of not wanting to slide back into where we were, but to embrace new ways of working. So in order to do that, it just takes a little bit of time, and while we're still moving through the various phases of the recovery route, it's important that we maintain the social distancing as much as we possibly can. So I'm supportive of continuing the emergency executive and reviewing things at the council meeting in September. At the same time, starting other aspects of the meetings and using virtual meetings wherever possible. In relation to the recess, I think it's important that we recognise the work of the officers and the staff. The reports that come to the emergency executive don't just mysteriously appear overnight. There's a lot of work going into that, and over the last few weeks there's been a huge amount of work pulling together all the plans, as we saw from the emergency executive last week. We need to give officers time to go away and get on with the work that needs to get done, and also to have a bit of downtime, because we all know that going 100 miles an hour continuously for such a long period of time, you start to perhaps not see the clarity of things, and I think it will give better outcomes if we can have some rested time. So I'm supportive of having some kind of break. However, there is a need, obviously, to have a continuation, as discussed last week. It's important that we get the kids back to school, and as a result we've already breached what was being proposed, because we will have a further meeting hopefully next week, and I would give an undertaking that if there is any ministerial announcements or significant changes that require members to take a decision during the summer period, that an emergency executive would be arranged to do that for a single item, but that having a shorter recess and starting back earlier in August would see the best way forward, and it allows members as well to take some downtime. I think having had a couple of the planning meetings virtually and seen how they've worked and being able to take decisions has allowed the process to be progressed, and I think the refinement of enabling the deputations to be added virtually is really helpful. I don't want to say much more than that, other than that this is not a permanent change and will be reviewed again in September, at which time we hope to be able to get back to what would be our normal decision making process of the two individual executives, and continue the work that is in front of us, particularly around the budget and our economic recovery plans. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as in section 2.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Then Councillor Goldie.
Thank you, Provost, and thanks for completely ignoring me and my colleague Councillor Collett in the last agenda item. You said you were going to let another 2 or 3 people in, and then you've totally moved on.
Well, excuse me,
yes,
sir.
Provost.
Excuse me, sir. I apologise for that, but I didn't see any hands coming up. Thank you.
Apology accepted then, Provost.
Thank you.
I'm happy. I agree with everything the council leader said, and I'm happy to support the recommendations, reserving the right.
Thank you very much, sir. Councillor Goldie, did you have your hand up?
Provost, can I come in?
Okay, Councillor
Mayor,
Bissett,
can you hear me now?
but somebody had said that Councillor Goldie had his hand up
I'm
for a
trying to
while.
get- Can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor Bissett.
Thanks. I think we are taking the right approach, like a cautious approach to this, and I think we need to take things a bit at a time, and we'll get there. And I was glad to see that we're going to put virtual meetings in for people coming to speak at planning meetings, so we can get them involved. So we basically agree with the recommendations, but we'll have an amendment on item 4. So perhaps that could be put up. I can read the amendment out. I think Mr. Perry might put that up. So the amendment for item 4 is agrees to shorten the recess from 30th of June to 2020 to 25th of August 2020 to 30th of June 2020 to 6th of August, and to give chief officers delegated powers in consultation with the leader of the council and the leaders of the main opposition groups, with the proviso that a meeting of the emergency executive should take place if any significant decision is required. Thank you, Provost. That's our amendment.
Well, obviously, it's just came forward, so people need to have an opportunity to digest that. I'll go back to Councillor Meikle-John and ask her how you want to proceed with the digestion of this amendment.
Provost, I've already given that undertaking, that should there been any material change coming forward, it's not any different to what I've already given by way of my narrative. So I don't see that there should be any particular difficulties with this.
I think perhaps Mr.
Hold on a second. I see another hand up. Councillor Gardner, want to come in there?
Just a quick observation. I'd like to ask Councillor Bissett, is it deliberate to make it 1 day shorter?
No, it's no deliberate, Councillor Gardner, no. That's maybe
a mistake.
Okay.
That's maybe the typo.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So,
perhaps,
Councillor Bissett, did you have a seconder?
I think we've got a seconder there. Councillor Nimmo, I think, is going to second it.
Well, could you come in and do it then? Thank you.
Yeah, Provost, can I just formally second the amendment?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, Provost, could I come in?
You could come in.
Fine, thanks. I recognise the hard work that officers have done, and in difficult circumstances across the council, not only officers in law and admin and various places like that. But I do think it's a bit much to take a recess in effect at any time for the situation that we find ourselves in. There will be no recess for the care workers. There will be no recess or lessening of work for people on bin lorries. There will be no recess or less work for anyone else in the council service. So I think that people, the majority of whom are at the top of the tree and are very well rewarded for the efforts that they put in, I'm disappointed that we keep pushing about recesses. And to be fair to the leader of the council, Mrs. Meikle-John, she did say that people would work very hard and that this would give councillors a rest. Well, I'm probably one of the oldest councillors in there and I don't need a rest. I think we should all be digging in together. I don't see really any need at all for a recess. If an officer needed time off, an individual officer, fine, take time off. But a recess at this time, with people facing unemployment, as I say again, but without being too boring, care workers, the work that they've done, the danger they've faced, no recess for them. So I'm just a bit concerned, really, that we're talking about a recess when they were facing a situation that this country has never faced, and this town, this district has never faced.
Okay, thank you for your input. Councillor Alexander.
Councillor Goldie implying that the staff don't get any annual leave? Because that's the conclusion that can be reached.
I will respond to that.
A statement is made that they don't require a recess. The fact is that the recess is a restricted period of time when members can take leave with their families. And, you know, I'd hate to rob anyone, including Councillor Goldie, time away with his family. I'm not going on holiday this year. I don't know many of my colleagues who are going on holiday this year. We will be here during the recess. But the bottom line is that they're still entitled to a break, still entitled to use the members' equivalent of annual leave. And the staff are quite entitled as well to use their annual leave as they see fit.
Yeah, 18 months. I'll just respond to that.
Yeah.
And thank Mr. Alexander for coming in with that point. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that any officer should do without their holidays. I'm not suggesting that for a minute. The council, I think, has got 6,500 staff. Some of them will take holidays at different times. We're in very deep trouble here, and we're in a very deep and worrying situation. And I can assure you that during the recess, all the officers will not be away, because officers will be doing other bits and pieces of work. I'm not suggesting anybody should be away with their holidays. I'm simply making a comment from my personal opinion that if we're going to do that, we should note the fact that these have done their work, they've done hard work, but they've not put themselves in harm's way, like the care workers or the bin lorry drivers or the people doing rough mute or doing it Kinneil Kerse. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Goldie. You've answered that. I think Councillor Murtagh had a hand up. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. I wanted to come in on a similar point to Councillor Alexander, in that, you know, it's partly that although we see the work of senior officers very clearly in terms of producing committee reports and presenting to the committee, I think what does have to be emphasised is that below you know, what we are visibly able to see, there is a whole number of support staff who are required to do that, who have, through this pandemic, cancelled their annual leave, been there at all hours of the day and night to try and support the work, all the way from, you know, council leader down to, you know, whatever level it happens to be, and that those people deserve time with their families and they have not been able to plan that time to have off. And this was the time where they had that surety that even for a shorter period, they would be able to take that time with their family and know they could take that time with their family. And I think that what's been highlighted throughout the pandemic, actually, in a very welcome way, is the impact on everybody's emotional and mental health, and how important it is to reduce the stress and understanding of, you know, when you're going to be able to take that rest. Right now, I'm considering for the volunteers who've been working in the food banks, how on earth, given that they're going to continue to work through, how we're going to allow them to take some time and plan that time and know they'll be able to take that time as well. And what I want to say is that, whereas, you know, Councillor Goldie is saying about the people who are working in, whether it's at rough mute or whether it's in our housing services, whatever, they will be able, and they have been able to take annual leave and will be able to plan annual leave. Many other people have not. And I think that it's also a disservice to say that, well, senior officers and members of staff have been dealing with in very difficult practical situations, they've also been dealing with very emotionally difficult situations, particularly when it comes to some of the health and social care decisions, and seen the impact on, you know, the staff and our own colleagues on making some of these decisions day after day. And Councillor Meikle-John is entirely right in that it's important that everybody is at their best. Nobody is suggesting that we won't be there to make emergency decisions, but I very much would like to have a surety for our staff that they will be able to have that time at whatever level they're at, and that we appreciate the work and we appreciate how difficult this whole period has been during the pandemic. I don't know any other councillors, but I certainly have had more casework than ever, more practical things than ever, more support things to be doing in the community, and would very much appreciate to have a little bit of surety of some time. But I am always, as I'm sure we all are, on call and working hard. All that we're saying for recess is there won't be committees scheduled, and a little bit of understanding of planning. And I think the public should understand that at all times, all our councillors and all of our staff and our senior officers are working hard. This is not a holiday. It's in order to enable us to plan time and to give our hard-working staff the comfort of knowing they will be able to take that time with their family. I think that's very important.
Okay, thank you. But you will appreciate that Councillor Goldie he's got his opinion like everybody else in the situation. Before I bring anybody else in, I would just like to clarify for Mr. Moody what the major difference is in the recommendation as to the amendment that's come forward. Mr. Moody.
Provost, could I possibly ask a question that could maybe be answered at the same time?
Pardon?
Could I possibly ask a question that could be answered at the same time?
Yeah.
I would just, I mean, I think I kind of covered my narrative, basically what's in the amendment, but I would also ask that we remain to have consultation with the relevant portfolio holders or the conveners. That remains as part of the narrative, because I think it's important that if there are requirements to have an emergency executive, that not all the portfolio holders are sitting on the emergency executive, but it's important that they are involved in that decision-making process, and I would just like to clarify that.
Clarified, yeah. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. So the 2 points raised are firstly your own, Provost, of is there a difference between what is in the recommendation 4 and the amendment. The substantial difference relates to a confirmation by way of council decision that there would be a meeting called if required. But as the leader correctly says, she's given that undertaking to the council already, and it's covered within the report as well, which makes it clear that in recess powers, you would anticipate that an emergency meeting would be called if required. So that's the substantial distinction, is finding something within a decision or having it by way of an undertaking. So in substance, it's not a significant difference, it's just the route by which it's achieved or recorded.
Okay.
In relation to the leader's questions in relation to the involvement and consultation of those beyond the leader and the main opposition leaders, the normal recess powers that we grant are those set out in the recommendation 4, and it includes conveners and deputy conveners to take account of the fact that there are committees other than the executive. So if there needed to be a decision, for instance, taken on a civic licensing matter, then it would be more appropriate to consult with the convener and deputy convener of that committee, rather than necessarily with the leader of the council and the main opposition leaders. So that's the main reason for the distinction there. I have to say, in terms of the actual practice of recess powers, almost, I think, all that I can think of that have taken place over the past 2 years or so have been consultation by way of the leader and the 2 main opposition leaders. So there's probably maybe not as much lost there as might otherwise appear, because I think it probably practically matches what has happened in the past. So I think in summary, Provost, there maybe isn't a massive amount of distinction between the 2 positions that we have in front of us.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Councillor Bissett now. Councillor Bissett, you put forward the amendment. You've heard what the leader has said in relation to your summary, and also you've heard the legal interpretation by Mr. Moody. Are you quite happy, or do you want to withdraw the amendment?
No, I'll just keep the amendment as Provost.
Keep the amendment as it is. Okay. And you had a second, and that was Councillor Nimmo, is that right? Thank you.
Provost, can I possibly come back in on that?
Yes, on you come.
I did formally move second the amendment, and I support the amendment as it stands, but just personally, on a personal note, I'd be quite happy for the recess to be done away with totally. I just don't see any reason for it at all. It's already been mentioned. Officers can take leave. They plan their leave well in advance in a lot of cases. Elected members can take time off when they deem it appropriate. It doesn't have to be during July and August. It could be any time throughout the year. So I don't see any need for a recess at all.
Okay.
No recess. There's no delegated powers. And so long as the committees have a quorum to take decisions, then we just go on as they are. That would be an ideal scenario. Thanks, Provost.
No, thank you for your opinion. Okay, we have a motion moved and seconded.
Provost,
we have an amendment moved and seconded. Does Councillor Reid want to come in at this stage?
Provost, Councillor Garner's want to come in.
Where see, I can't see you sometimes. Where is Councillor Garner?
It's maybe a wee flaw again, Provost. I don't want to follow you.
Councillor Reid, Councillor Garner and Councillor McCluskey. I still can't see Councillor Garner at all. I see you now. Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Wasn't wanting to come in, Provost.
Well, you didn't. Councillor Garner then. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I'm a wee bit confused here, and I think Colin cleared it up pretty precisely, covered everything there, and I think the two of them were extremely close, and there wasn't much difference but the amendment standing. But we had Councillor Goldie coming in, and I don't know if that was a further amendment to take away a recess and annual leave, and then we had the seconder of the amendment coming in saying that we should take away the recess. So that is that another further amendment? I'm really getting confused here.
No, wait a minute.
Just to clarify a wee bit, please.
Excuse me. There was only one amendment. There's a motion being moved and seconded, and one amendment moved by Councillor Bissett, seconded by Councillor Nimmo. There's been no further amendments.
No further amendments to take away annual leave and take away a recess.
Provost, I did say that was my personal opinion.
That's your person. Okay, thank you, and you're entitled to your personal opinion. Okay, then we're going to go to the vote. Does anybody else want in? Go to the vote. Councillor McCluskey, I can't see you, but somebody else sees you. Okay, Councillor McCluskey.
Right, thanks, Provost. We seem to have been losing track there of obviously some of the things that was going through. I think that Councillor Goldie was referring to. We're very lucky with our officers. We've got officers who are planning officers signing up to go and get trained in crematoriums in case they were needed, or to go there and sign up with bin lorry drivers and everything. We've got great officers that have came forward here during the very difficult times. What was the original motion here was talking about, and we've heard administration officers saying that they're entitled during this month of recess to go and take their holidays, right? And at the same time, we were putting forward a motion where the conveners, portfolio holders, would make any important decisions or not. If they were there in Spain, how could they make these decisions if the portfolio holders were going on holiday? So it makes sense to go there and make it that who's available at executive meeting during that time. It's what the motion of Councillor Bissett has came up. We would just go on emergency meeting, and that would be that for any important decisions. And that's certainly the view that I'll be supporting when it goes to the vote. But as I say, it seemed to be going there. It seems that if Councillor Goldie speaks, then automatically members of opposition want to go in and come in. I think it's ridiculous.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. We'll go to the vote now. Mr. Moody. David Aitchison, Councillor Aitchison, sorry. Sometimes your hand was too high, we couldn't see you. Thank you.
I was turning my sound in.
The mover of the motion not entitled to sum up?
Can't hear him.
Provost, I get an opportunity to sum up because I've been trying to.
Yeah, if you want. Yeah.
Just come in first.
No, I didn't have my hand up.
Right, okay. It's just to say that that there seems to be a fallacy that recess is just for holidays, and that is not the case. And I don't think there's going to be many members going very far this year for their holidays, and there's still work to get done within the communities. However, again, officers are entitled to their annual leave, and a lot of them have been working without a break, and many have been working 7 days. And particularly within our education service, 7 days and beyond. And we are not going to get the best if our officers burn out. And yeah, there are other people there to do various pieces of work, but we actually have a relatively small team. and they all have a part to play. They're all cogs in a big wheel, and it's about their welfare as much as anything. This pandemic has affected everybody to varying degrees. Some will be more affected than others, but I think we have a duty of care to all our officers at whatever level, including those that are at the front line, including those that have been providing directly to our service users, and our managers will be looking to try and ensure that they get that break as well. What we don't have is necessarily any reports that need to come forward during the next 4 weeks, with the exception of the Education Executive next week. So there are no plan papers that are required to come forward, and there was a clear undertaking to give, if there was ministerial announcements, if there was material changes, to have an emergency executive. So technically, we are looking at giving a waiver on one meeting probably alone in July, that would allow officers to just collect their thoughts, have a look at their work plans, and be prepared for when we start back in the first executive, which is planned for the 6th of August. I don't think that is unreasonable. And I think that would show good diligence on our part in looking after our staff and our staff at all levels. And I think that as elected members, we're going to have a bit of work to do during the recess. We're going to have to start to look at an alternative budget coming forward. So for me, I don't see it as I'm going to be sitting sunning myself anywhere over the recess, but it gives a bit of time and space to do pieces of work. And that's why that was built in. I don't see that the amendment, I think the amendment's a bit of a nondescript really, and that it just is reiterating the undertaking that I gave, and I gave yesterday at the pre-meeting to Councillor Bissett and to Councillor Kerr, and I just think that it's just a bit of politicising, but we are where we are.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The motion, which consists of the recommendations, is moved by...
Mr. Moody, I actually accepted the amendment.
Was you accepted?
I actually accepted it some time ago.
Okay, then we'll just hold on a second. We'll clarify this. So she's accepted the amendment.
My apologies, Provost. I didn't pick that up. But if the leader is now confirming that, in fact, she accepts the amendment, then we don't need to proceed to the vote.
Okay, that brings us to the end then. Okay. Okay, then, thank you very much for your time, and apologies for anybody that I may miss. It's very difficult when you're sitting here with all these faces on the screen. Apologies again, and thank you very much, and everybody stay safe. Thank you.